Welcome to the American Safety Council webinar titled National Safety Month, Chat with the Expert. My name is Tim Jacobs. I am the Senior Vice President of Enterprise Workforce Solutions at ASC, and I have with me David Couch, the OTI Trainer of Record for 10 and 30 Construction and General Industry at the University of South Florida. David, if you wouldn't mind, can you just please give a brief introduction of yourself to the attendees?
Hello, everybody. My name is David Couch. I am a expert in occupational health and safety with a bachelor's in environmental management, bachelor's in occupational safety, and a master's in occupational safety. I'm also an OTI trainer for construction, general industry, maritime, and disaster workers. So I'm ready for the first question when you are.
Great. Thank you, David. So our goal today for everybody that has joined us is to have an interactive session giving you the ability to ask OSHA-related questions to David. We will be recording the session, and we will send out the recording to all registrants after the session has completed. The one thing I ask from a housekeeping perspective is that you utilize the Q&A button that is within your Zoom meeting taskbar to ask these questions, and I will monitor that section and pass those questions on to David. We are going to attempt to start here with a short poll around yourselves as the attendees. So I'm going to click launch on that, and that should pop up on your screen. We'll give everybody a few minutes here to answer that, assuming you see that. Perfect. Answers are starting to populate. All right, looks like we've got most people that have been able to answer. Give it maybe a few more seconds here. All right, I'm going to end the poll. Which should show you the results of that poll. So just go over the questions very quickly. How many years of experience you have within the safety industry? Obviously a wide range of knowledge and time spent in industry here. A lot of you when asked what is the most widely used topic within your organization for online training. A pretty even split between OSHA 10 and 30 hours, as well as lockout, tagout, and PPE, it looks like, as well as a little bit of fall protection falling in there as well. Question around what you utilize for classroom training, so different from online. Again, it looks like personal PPE and maybe a little bit of lockout, tagout, and fall protection is in there also. And then the final question is really what industry you're coming from. Again, a little bit of a widespread, some from general industry, some from manufacturing, and then obviously a number of others. So I'm going to stop sharing that poll and would like to actually get into some of the questions here. So again, use that Q&A button that's in your Zoom taskbar to ask the questions, and I will monitor that. And we will start with the first question for David, which is, how does improved safety translate to a company's financial bottom line? Well,
when we start looking at safety and the bottom line within an organization, we start looking at our insurance rates for your EMR, which is your experience modifier rate. This is heavily looked at mainly in the construction industry, where you want to keep your modifier below a 1. So basically how that's calculated, it's a 3-year rolling average, number of injuries, the cost of the claim, and the length of that claim ends up giving you a certain rate. So a lot of large job sites require you to be below 1. When you're talking about general industry or other industries, we're looking more at our workman's comp from what we call a DART rate, days away, days restricted. And they calculate that by, again, number of hours the company's worked versus the number of injuries they've had. And when you start getting into high numbers on there, which they would consider high, depending on your industry, mostly above a 3, which means you're having significant injuries, which means you're paying a higher premium in your workman's comp. So by having a safer facility or job site, keeping your employees trained, keeping their safety level at a high level, making sure you're enforcing all of your policies and procedures, and keeping that rate as low as possible translates into direct cost savings for the company. Now, a lot of people don't understand that these cost savings can be at a small end at tens of thousands of dollars, and then a high end at hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the organization that you're within. Next question.
Great. Thank you, David. Appreciate it. Just a question around some of the latest trends in OSHA standards. What are you seeing from a trend standpoint there?
OSHA right now is still focused on their Focus 4. For falls, trenching, excavation, electrical, and caught in between is their main focus right now. They're looking at updating several standards. Probably the biggest one that's going to affect a lot of companies is their standard on scissor lifts. They're looking at pulling that out of the scaffolding section and putting that into the powered industrial section. Most manufacturers now require tie-off within a scissor lift, which is a large change from when the OSHA standards were originally put in place. So now OSHA will come out when they're doing an inspection. If it has a tie-off point, you're not tied off, they will go back to the general duty clause and the duty to have fall protection, because the manufacturer now requires fall protection within that scissor lift. So I would say that's probably one of the most significant things that's going to catch a lot of companies off guard. They're also looking at, but it's pretty far out, an update to the electrical section. They just put in a whole bunch of new reserves within the standard on that. So hopefully we'll get more information on that in the next coming months. But right now they're focusing mostly on the powered industrial section and scaffolding sections.
Great. Thank you, David. Another really good question. What are good ways to get employees to complete their required safety compliance trainings? It's mentioned that in this particular organization that asked the question that they struggle to get employees to complete the safety trainings that they utilize online delivery for.
Well, depending on, are you having the employees do it during company time? Are you having them doing it off hours and then paying them separately from it? I do see in the 10 and 30-hour courses that we teach online, students will contact us where they've got 2 days left, they haven't even started the course. The big thing I would say for your incentives is, one, that you're going some type of bonus or something that says, hey, you complete this, we're going to pay you, an extra hour. I've seen that as a very good motivator. Another way is having them, sit down for so much time per day to complete the course. A 10-hour course or 30-hour course for OTI, where you get your Department of Labor cards, you have up to 6 months to complete it. So if you put an employee in front of a computer for an hour per day, it would take 30 days to complete a 30-hour course, and you're guaranteeing that employee to get done because you're forcing them to sit down and do it. The key thing to remember with those type courses is every section is time gated. So if it's a 30-hour course, they're going to spend 30 hours in there. But if they just go in, log in, and they don't do anything in the course at all, they're going to say, well, I did my 30 hours, but they haven't completed the course. That's because they haven't completed any of the course content. So, the motivational factor is, you're going to sit here, we're going to have you do a module today. Once you complete the module and finish out the quiz for that section, then you can go ahead and, go on for the day. So, the key is, how are you delivering that specific training to them? Or is it, you don't even be self-motivated to do it, or are you sitting them down at a corporate situation? In most cases, the corporate situation, you have the most control. If you are signing up a bulk of employees with American Safety Council, the manager, we can arrange not only for bulk purchases, but a way for you to log in and check on just your employees to see where they're at in the course in a student portal that we have for them. Hope that answers your question. Next question, if we have one.
Absolutely, we do. What are some of the most common injuries in today's workplace?
Most common. Well, it depends on how we're looking at this. Are we looking at it as first aid, or are we looking at it as requires a clinic visit? For first aid, the most common injury are hand injuries. Nicks, cuts, where they get a small cut, they need minor first aid, clean the wound, put some AAA antibiotic and a Band-Aid, and they're able to go back to work. Most companies don't track a lot of their first aid cases, but that gives them their trending. So if you see you get 25 hand injuries in a month, maybe we need to go ahead and look at, do we need a glove policy, or do we need to modify the tools they're using or the process? We always want to engineer out any type of safety concerns, but a lot of national construction companies have now gone to 100% glove policy and has greatly reduced their hand injuries. When we're talking about clinic visits, it is normally strains from improper lifting. And the best thing you can do to help avoid those type of injuries is proper training, and then monitoring when you're doing your site walks. Stand back from a group of employees that are working, especially if they're doing a lot of lifting, and see, are they using their legs to lift instead of bending at the waist? That is always the biggest thing. There's also modified lunging method, especially for people that are in warehousing distribution that are picking individual items off of pallets to stack it for shipment. The lunge is probably the best method for picking up items. But those are your two main top trenders as far as injuries within most companies.
Great. Thank you, David. Another question here. What is the importance of safety orientation into an organization?
Can you repeat that, please?
Sure. What is the importance of safety orientation into an organization? So from an employee standpoint, when they come into the organization, how important is that some of that initial safety orientation that they have that is required?
It's actually critical. OSHA mandates that all employees shall be trained. Anytime you see the word shall, that means you absolutely must do that. Depending on your organization, if you're construction, general industry, your training could be much different. Most large construction sites, their training is about 4 to 4.5 hours for the initial, just to get on a job site. And then you will have all of your specified training for additional equipment that they may be operating, or even some specialized tools. In general industry, not only is that a time to do your basic safety training that you need to do, but it also covers a lot of your environmental requirements within that specific setting. Even office staff should have some type of safety orientation, so they can know the evacuation routes, they can know where the first aid kits are if they need it, proper lifting techniques. So I know they sound very basic, but these things are very, very important. There's also a lot of things that have to be gone over on an annual basis or every 3-year basis, depending on what the specific topic is. You need to look at your specific organization and the standards that apply to them and see, when do I need to do that retraining? It's also very critical that you document this training. I normally have some type of small quiz at the end of it, so I can prove transfer of knowledge. There's always a sign-in sheet, and then we put stuff right in their employee file for training. This way, if you're ever audited by OSHA and they say, they interview your 5 employees, and they say, well, these employees say they've never received hazardous communication training. That's when you can go grab those 5 employees' files and say, well, here's the training for these 5 employees. Here we can show where they did a little quiz that included some HAZCOM training in regards to, where it is and how to get the information, and, their signature at the bottom. So by doing this, you're able to prove to OSHA that, yes, not only were they taught at the beginning when they first started, this was retaught on an annual basis, and here's the paperwork to back it up. And that 9 times out of 10 eliminates a possibility for a citation, because an employee just wanted to say, nope, I never got training on that, or they didn't understand the word HAZCOM or global harmonious system, depending on how they propose that question to the employee. Next question.
Great. Thank you, David. Yeah, a couple other questions here. Are employers who have lost employees in mass shootings being cited by OSHA? So kind of a question around the mass shootings that we've seen. And if they are, what does an organization do, or what can they do to kind of mitigate that?
Well, I have not personally heard of OSHA citing an employer for a mass shooting incident. This is a subject where, an individual, being an ex-employee, current employee, or somebody from the general public, is entering the establishment and creating harm. As long as your company is following their policies and procedures, and they're not doing anything in regards to violating the OSHA standard, there's nothing they can do about that. That would be more of a legal question in regards to, could there have been something additional done which is separate and apart from the OSHA standard?
Great. Thank you, David. Does the extinguisher annual retraining need to be hands-on, or would PowerPoint training of the past method and the hazards of using an extinguisher be sufficient?
After the initial training, normally just going back over the past and demonstrating, you do not have to discharge a fire extinguisher, but going over the past, going back over it with them. is probably your best solution. What I've normally done is invested in a water fire extinguisher. This way, when you're doing that initial training, and if you have employees that say, well, I really would like to go, do the hands-on again, with a water fire extinguisher, it's very easy to fill it back up, recharge it using air, and then the employee can then simulate putting out a fire using a water fire extinguisher instead of discharging an ABC fire extinguisher. There's also, for larger facilities, or if you're traveling from site to site, they now have an electronic version where it basically has a screen that's using a fire. It has a sensor, kind of like what you'd see on an Xbox. And when you discharge the digital fire extinguisher, which feels and looks like a regular one, and you're doing the sweeping motion, it's actually going ahead and putting the digital fire out with the correct sweeping motion on it. But according to the standard, you only have to do the hands-on initially, and then the refresher training does not have to be fully hands-on, just going back over the past system.
Great, thank you. The next question kind of revolves around the creation of a safety culture and a better received safety culture for employees. So question really being, kind of what is the best way to create that safety culture, or maybe some hints and tricks in creating a better received culture for employees?
Very, very good question. So, we always like to say safety starts with you being the individual. When you're talking about a safety culture, it has to start from the top, working its way back down to the bottom, and then back up again. It's having an open communication to where if you have a safety concern, you can present that, and there not be, that it's just put to the wayside, or yeah, we'll get to it. You have a good safety committee. They meet on a regular basis. Not only do they meet, but when they do meet, that there is changes made that improve safety within the company. It's having a good budget to where you have money to go make corrections as they're needed throughout the facilities, that there are some type of safety recognition for when you guys meet your goals, with be it injury illness reduction, or so many days. You notice a regular employee going out of their way to help another employee to ensure that the job they're doing is safely, or they see it being done unsafely and they're correcting that person. On the job site I'm currently out here on, they use safety bucks, where it's like coupons to go on to an internal website, and they can order jackets or upgraded safety glasses or things of that nature. But probably the biggest thing I would ever say that builds the best safety culture is a safety person that is not in their office, they're out in the field or out in the facility, going and talking with people, having that 2 to 3 minute interaction, getting to know the people you're with. And then if they say, hey, I've got this issue, then you make sure you're addressing it as quickly as possible. It can be as simple as you walk up and they see that they have scratch safety glasses. I always carry 3 or 4 pairs with me and say, here, let me swap those out for you real quick. It's those small things that you get the buy-in from the employees. Because if all you do is say, here's a policy, and then push it down on the employees without letting them have feedback in it, that's where you get pushback instead of the buy-in. So that's what I would probably say is we need to go ahead and make sure, not only do we have from the top down and the budgetary that we need to do this, but it's the attitude of the safety professionals on site to make sure from a lead to a supervisor to a manager to the owner of a company have that same mentality when they're out on the floor. If an employee says, hey, we really could use this, it would make it safer, more efficient, that, it is seriously looked at. Next question.
Great. Next question is around kind of tailgate talks or toolbox talks. We've heard them called all types of different things. But if you perform one of those type of short talks on topics like heat stress or something like that, can that be counted as a training event if everyone participates and signs off?
Yes, it can. A toolbox talk is a small mini training session. And I wholeheartedly recommend that you have everybody sign off on that. Again, when you have an OSHA visit and they're saying, well, they never briefed us on this, then, that's where you can pull back out that toolbox talk and say, well, on this date, at this time, here's a list of all the employees that attended. We discussed this. Also, that would be covered in your job hazard analysis, that you would also have the employee sign that here is your daily job task, here is the hazards, here's how we're going to mitigate it. That can also be considered micro training that can be used on the job site. I'm going to give a little plug for American Safety Council at this point, because they're also working on a micro trainings for employees. I don't know if we've fully brought that on board yet, but that's something they're working on to make things easier for these toolbox talks, to where we can actually present that on a screen, even project it using a projector, and have consistent training through multiple facilities where this can be done. And then you're just having employees sign off that they're attending this. And then they make that available if you ever need it for an OSHA audit.
Great. Thank you, David. Next question is kind of relates to evacuation planning. Question is, what are the requirements for employers to provide evacuation safety plans, and what is an appropriate time frame to implement them? It sounds like this comes from somebody that has recently moved into a new building, and risk management is working on an evacuation plan, but they haven't provided it to them yet as it pertains to kind of fire evacuation. Is there, what are the requirements of employers to provide that evacuation and safety plans, and what's the appropriate time frame to get implemented, David?
Well, I'm going to guess this is either an office building or it is some type of warehousing manufacturing. This should have be done before the employees are moving into the space. There is not only a requirement by OSHA, but there's an NFPA requirement that you have evacuation routes set up upon occupation of, or where you're occupying a building. There's also a requirement that you must do drills twice per year. So we may not have the drill set up right away, but as we're occupying this new space, there should be within a matter of a day or two of getting everybody together going, okay, a little bit of housekeeping. We need to make sure we're going over our evacuation plans and our mustering points, because moving into a facility can sometimes have its own hazards. Somebody may be plugging too much into an outlet. There may be an overload of a circuit. Something could trip the fire alarm, and then everybody, if they don't know what the evacuation plan is, if they're not posted throughout the building as required by law, then it's more of a scramble of everybody trying to figure out where to go. Plus, you need to already have your people set up that, are going through the building and making sure everybody's getting out. And that these employees are supposed to go to this restroom point, so we can check those employees in to know that we got everybody out of the building. I go back to a food distribution warehouse that I worked in at one time, where we had anhydrous ammonia. It was critical to know every day who was there, who wasn't there, And, if you work in this section of the building, that you had to go to this one spot because we had to check, because if something went wrong with that anhydrous, then, if you're on the list, you're not here, then the panic starts coming in, where we call fire rescue and say, we have an employee missing. We believe they're still in the building. So evacuation is extremely important to have that set up beforehand. Next question.
How about, is there any requirement to have air quality checked within a facility or a space?
Depends on the industry. A normal building, office building, no, there's not. Construction, we do air quality checks during certain phases of construction. In manufacturing, though, depending on what you're making and what processes are involved, you may have ongoing air monitoring going on. At the airport that I'm currently working at, we remodeled our main lobby. What was it, about 2 years ago we completed that project. We had 136 air quality monitoring stations throughout the passenger areas, just in case. There was no standard that required it, but because of the potential of just everyday dust from removing ceiling tiles, we wanted to make sure not only the traveling public was not having any concern, but all of the tenant spaces, which are your airlines, and the little stores and kiosks, and the airport employees, we were not having any issues. We did have OSHA come out twice during that, and they stated that, we went above and beyond the standard by having this, and that it was great data set points for them, because all they had to do was look at the reports, which pulled data every 15 minutes on all these sensors, and we could show that we never went over any permissible exposure limits.
Great, thank you. Couple questions around safety professionals themselves, maybe not just kind of the rank and file employee, but the safety professional. When bringing on a new safety professional, what is the first thing you have them do? And kind of follow up to that is, how do you get them oriented to the workplace?
Well, this, depending on the safety professional, if I'm bringing somebody that is going to be part of a safety team and they're coming directly out of school with less than 5 years experience, I'm going to partner them up with somebody for 3 to 6 months, maybe longer. If they're literally right out of school, I'm going to consider them more of an associate. And the first thing I want them to do is read through the policies and procedures that we have for the company. They need to understand, here's the safety program. I've found sometimes people with fresh set of eyes say, hey, reading through here, maybe this one section here we need to look at and reword. Even though I have 30 years plus experience, I take anytime somebody reviews one of my programs or procedures and says, hey, I think you might want to look at this, I'll take a fresh look at it and say, yep, you know what, you're right. Or explain to them, well, for this facility, for this reason, here's why this program is exactly the way it's written and enforced. If it is a safety professional that is just taking over a facility, they've got 5 to 10 years experience. It's starting with, again, reading through the policies and procedures, getting with all the department heads, seeing what has worked for them, what issues they feel they've had, and what type of support that they need from safety. Once you get those worked out, and then you want to start doing those individual employee interactions. Go around, get to know everybody, make sure that that culture that you want to have for this company is what you're presenting to the company. So it's very, very, very dynamic as far as the interactions. And if I got a senior safety professional, coming in to take over like a region or a very large facility or project. I will let them hit the ground running and support them. What do you need? Because I'm expecting them to already know to go through everything and go to do those checks. So I'm just touching base with them and making sure they're okay. And I touching base with the leadership out at that location to make sure that they are having those interactions and getting to know everybody, so everybody understands he's support for you, your support for him.
Great. And kind of piggybacking on that, what are some of the kind of beginner base level safety certifications that a person can obtain for themselves?
Well, I like to tell everybody to go look at my LinkedIn page and just expand my education. But if you are very new, very fresh to safety, you've not gone and gotten a bachelor's or even an associate's in occupational safety, I would say start with a 30-hour OTI course within your industry. Maybe go take the prerequisite course to become a trainer. Then I would look at your facility and see what are the big challenges within that facility. And then start taking those little 1-hour courses. It could be on fall protection, it could be on scaffolding, it could be on machine guarding. American Safety Council has a plethora of these small, 1-hour courses that we get into 2 and 4-hour courses. That's a great way to start into a safety career. It's also economically affordable if somebody's wanting to do it on their own, to start toe stepping into this part of the industry. But at the end of the day, you need to be looking at your longer term goal of getting that, bachelor's in occupational safety. There are multiple colleges out there that offer this. I personally went through Columbia Southern University. Did 2 bachelor's and a master's in 6 years through there. And I'm going to tell you, it made a huge difference in not only my knowledge base, but the recognition you get from your peers and from your coworkers, that, you understand what you're doing. But if you're going from a very beginner basics, it's going in and looking at what courses affect me, what courses affect my coworkers. And then here's another key thing is talk to your safety professional, talk to your leadership, tell them I want to look at getting into being a safety professional, and what do they offer in regards to getting you to that point. Because a lot of companies are very happy to have people that will come in and say, this is what I'm going to do. And they'll start pairing you up with safety for so many hours a week. And a lot of companies have tuition reimbursement also that you can get to not only for these small courses, but for degree programs.
Great. And what I think will probably be the last question here, David, and it kind of relates to some of these previous questions as well, but what's the best way for somebody to improve the safety professionals that work at their facilities' abilities?
Continuing education. That is the key with this industry, is there's always something to learn. As an OTI, I have to renew my teaching certificate every 4 years. And since I have 4 of them, I will take 1 per year. There are lots of other courses that I go take. I'm, your 40-hour HAZWOPER course, then you got to take an 8-hour annual refresher for that one. And if you're in management, it's going and interacting with your safety professional. It's not just, send me a weekly report or monthly report or quarterly report. for a lot of senior management, if everything's going good, safety is just the guy over there in that office. We want to make sure that we are interacting. And, you know, one of the things I did was I always kept multiple types of candy in my office, and I would find out what the VPs liked and the managers liked. So they'd stop by and get a little candy. And for me, we'd talk and have those interactions. And, you know, that's part of how you improve things is those small, quick conversations. I've handled more things that I need to handle with my superiors by them just stopping by, grabbing a piece of candy and say, oh, by the way, you know, if you could, I got one quick question for you, or could you consider this, or I'd like to be able to do this program, you know, or I'd like to throw a pizza party for this department. You know, that's, you know, being able to communicate those things. So if you've got a safety who seems shy or seems that they need coaching in regards to public speaking, you know, then I would look at sending them to courses for that. Make sure that they're always having those abilities to increase their knowledge base, increase their skill set out there. We still got a couple more minutes if you want to take one more.
Yeah, I do have actually one more question that came up, and it's regarding a resume that was provided that had a certification, maybe that was OSHA/RIT certified as a general industry safety and health specialist and general industry safety professional. Is that a certificate that you have knowledge on? And if so, you know, how effective should we consider that certificate?
Let me see what RIT is. So for the RIT, I currently don't have an RIT, and I've never really interacted with anybody that has an RIT. Now, as far as the specialists, there are different organizations that, like the Board of Certified Safety Professionals, they offer a tiered certificate program where, you know, CSP is supposed to be the gold standard, and then you have a GSP, and then you've got a certified safety manager, and there's several different levels for that. If there's somebody who is an industrial hygienist, that is a completely separate degree program and specialty within safety. These are the people that go out and do the testing for air quality, or they're doing testing for audiometric to see how loud things are within your facility. You know, there are just so many different qualifications out there. USF has some certified safety professional where you take so many of these courses, and then it'll give you a separate certificate for that. And then you have the outside organizations that you can go to that will give you other certifications, you know, associates in safety management, which is one of the ones that I have. You know, so again, this boils down to all the training, all of the different certifications that you can go out and get. Just everything you can have is great for the resume, and it's also great when you sit down to have OSHA's come up to you and go, you know, what are your qualifications? You know, one thing that we really haven't touched here is the Corps of Engineers and their requirements. And I don't know if anybody out here in this audience has to deal with them, but you know, you have to have so many hours of training every year. And not only do you have to have that training, but they go back and check on your trainer to make sure your trainer is qualified to teach these courses. And I deal with that on a regular basis where, you know, I get contacted by the Corps of Engineers and say, all right, I got a certificate for somebody to go 1 hour fall protection training. what makes you qualified to teach this? And that's where I'm able to pull out a different qualification I have and say, well, here's where I'm a trained trainer. So all of these things are very, very important. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for attending. Really appreciate the time being able to spend and some of the great questions that were sent in. David, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it and passing on your knowledge of the safety industry. If you have further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. There's an email address here, obviously americansafetycouncil.com, tpctraining.com, a couple ways that you can find out a little bit more about what TPC and ASC offer. Again, we will be sending out the recording of this webinar to all registrants. So once again, thank you for attending. Everybody carry on and have a safe day.